Have you ever read one of Jesus' parables and walked away more confused than when you started? You are not alone in that. In fact, the disciples themselves pulled Jesus aside after one of his most famous parables and said, "We do not understand. Can you explain this to us?" These were the men who walked with him every day, who heard every word he spoke, who had front row seats to everything he did, who watched him heal the sick and calm the storm and raise the dead. And they still needed him to break it down for them. So if you have ever felt like the parables are somehow just out of reach, like there is something happening in them that you are almost getting, but not quite, that feeling is not a sign that something is wrong with your faith. It might actually be a sign that you are paying closer attention than most people ever do. Because here is what most people never get told about the parables. Jesus did not speak in parables to make things easier to understand. He spoke in parables on purpose, deliberately, intentionally, with full knowledge of exactly what he was doing and why. And the reason he gave for doing it will completely change the way you read everything he ever said. Matthew 13:34. All these things Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. Nothing without a parable. Not some things. Not the complicated things. Not just the deep theological concepts that needed a story to make them accessible. Nothing. Every single thing he said to the crowds was wrapped in a story. A farmer, a field, a seed, a lost sheep, a prodigal son, a hidden treasure, a pearl of great price, a net full of fish, layer upon layer of story, and underneath every story, something that only certain people were going to find. Now, a few verses earlier in Matthew 13, the disciples asked Jesus directly. They said, Why do you speak to them in parables? And his answer is one of the most honest and most surprising things he ever said. Matthew 13:11-13. Jesus answered, To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. He did it on purpose. The parables were not designed to be universally clear to everyone who heard them. They were designed to reveal truth to the ones who were genuinely seeking it, and to conceal it from the ones who were not. They were a filter, a divine sorting mechanism. The same story landing completely differently depending on the posture of the heart receiving it. Think about what that means for a moment. Picture that hillside in Galilee. Thousands of people gathered. Farmers and fishermen and merchants and religious leaders and curious onlookers and people who had nothing better to do that afternoon. All of them hearing the same words from the same voice at the same time. And yet, the experience of those words was not the same for everyone standing there. Two people could sit on that hillside and hear the exact same parable from Jesus. One walks away with a shrug. Interesting story. Nice imagery. Moving on with their day. The other walks away with something burning inside them that they cannot explain. Something that will not let them go. Something that pulls them back to think about it again and again until the meaning begins to open up, like a door that has been waiting for the right hand to turn the handle. Same words, completely different experience, not because of intelligence, not because of biblical education, not because one person was more deserving than the other, because of the posture of the heart. The parable was doing exactly what it was designed to do to both of them. And here is what makes that extraordinary. Jesus knew who was standing in that crowd. He knew which hearts were genuinely hungry and which ones were there to test him or observe him, or simply pass the time. He knew before the first word left his mouth who was going to walk away, changed, and who was going to walk away unmoved. And he told the story anyway, to all of them, because that is what mercy looks like. Everyone gets the same invitation. What each person does with it is entirely up to them. That is the genius of the parable. It never forces anything. It simply makes the truth available and waits to see who wants it badly enough to look beneath the surface for it. Now I want to take you back further, because Jesus did not invent this approach on his own. He was fulfilling something that had been spoken about him centuries before. He ever opened his mouth on that hillside. Matthew 13:35. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world. Hidden since the foundation of the world. Let that land for a moment. The things Jesus was teaching in those stories were not new ideas he had come up with during his years of ministry. They were not creative illustrations he developed to make ancient concepts more relatable. They were truths that had been woven into the fabric of creation itself since before time began. Ancient, eternal, waiting for the right moment and the right voice to bring them to the surface. And now, here was that voice. On a hillside in Galilee, surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives. And he was unlocking things that had been hidden since before the first day existed. That is the nature of the kingdom of heaven. It does not announce itself with obvious fanfare. It does not force itself on anyone. It does not arrive in the most obvious place with the most obvious signs. It hides itself in the ordinary, in a seed, in a field, in yeast working silently through dough, in a woman sweeping her house looking for a lost coin, in a father running down a road toward a son who had given up on coming home. It places itself exactly where only the ones who are genuinely looking will find it. And to the ones who find it, it is worth everything. The man who finds the treasure hidden in the field does not hesitate. He goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Not reluctantly, not after careful deliberation about whether the cost is reasonable. With joy, because he knows what he found. He knows what it is worth, and no price feels too high for the thing you have been searching for your whole life, without knowing exactly what it was. That is the response the parables are designed to produce in the person whose heart is in the right posture. Not confusion, not frustration, not a sense of being left out of something, a kind of holy hunger, a reaching, a pulling back the curtain and finding something so extraordinary that everything else rearranges itself around it. Think about your own experience with the parables. Have you ever read one and felt something stir in you that you could not quite name? Something that pulled you to sit with it longer than you expected? Something that surfaced in your mind later in the day when you had not been thinking about Scripture at all? That stirring is not accidental. That is not just your mind engaging with an interesting story. That is the parable doing exactly what Jesus designed it to do. It is our Father's way of reaching past the surface of your understanding and touching something deeper, something that recognizes truth when it hears it even before the mind has fully caught up with what it heard. Jesus spoke in parables because truth that is discovered is owned differently than truth that is simply handed to you. When you have to seek it, when you have to sit with it and wrestle with it and come back to it again and bring it to our Father and ask Him to open your eyes to what is actually being said in it, the understanding that comes goes all the way down. It becomes yours in a way that a straightforward explanation delivered and received and filed away could never produce. He was not being obscure. He was not being mysterious for the sake of mystery. He was being generous in the deepest possible way. He was giving the ones who wanted it, the most valuable kind of knowing there is, the kind that changes you, not just informs you, the kind that becomes part of how you see everything, the kind that comes from seeking and finding rather than being told and moving on. So the next time you sit with a parable and it does not open up immediately, do not walk away. Sit with it. Read it again. Ask our Father to show you what is hidden inside it for you specifically, because the fact that you are still looking, the fact that something in you will not let it go, means the parable is already working in you exactly the way Jesus intended. The secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, not because you earned them, because you are seeking them. And to the one who seeks, more will be given. Every time, without exception. That is not a suggestion. That is a promise from the one who spoke in parables on purpose and always knew exactly who was listening. What is our Father saying to you through this today? Take a moment to think about that.